Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. DB will be joining me here shortly from the Pillar Exterior stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. He is on his way now. And, of course, we've got our guy Shane Schillerberg in his little birdhouse this morning. How you doing, Shane?
Doing
It's a great question.
Shane, I've always wondered when it's mornings like this, you know, it's like raining outside. It's not terribly pleasant. We live in Nebraska, so we have, winters are a little rough. You were a long time smoker, do you ever wonder, why am I still going outside right now? Is that something that ever crosses your mind?
It's a great question.
No, not really.
Because I've always wondered that.
I like going outside.
That's when I was like, yeah, even if I'm not a smoker, but even if I wanted to, I'd be like, yeah, I couldn't do it in the winter. It's not for me. It's just not for me. You're tougher than I am, Shane. Anyway, we'll get the show going here.
Well, I want people that want to compete. I want people that want to go outside. I want people that, if you got to toughen up over there, Buttercup.
I'm not going to do that. Not for smoking. I'm just not going to do it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's too cold. I'm not going outside when it's cold just for no reason. Coming up on the show today, we got Rich Scarcella. He covers Penn State football for the Reading Eagle. Coming up at 8:30, we're going to talk to Alexis Boulos. She is the GM for Union Omaha. They're on to the semifinal in the USL League One playoffs this weekend after a big 1-0 win in their opening round game. At 8:45, we'll talk to Ryan Burns about Minnesota, the Gophers. He covers them for 24/7 Sports. And then we will talk to our guy Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7 coming up at 9. But a lot going on in the sports world yesterday. We'll wait for DB here to get into too much Rhule audio, but it was the tip-off of the college basketball season last night, which I know I'm very excited about. Nebraska played and kind of kept it close until probably later than most people were comfortable with. They got off to kind of an early fast start, and then just sort of let Texas Rio Grande Valley. I'm probably just going to call them Rio Grande moving forward, and so there's no confusion here. But because that is a word salad of a university name there down in Texas. So no, but Rio Grande's hung in there. They shot the 3-point ball really well. They I believe it was 4-point game with about 4 minutes left to go in that one. Which, if you're in Nebraska, you say, okay, we got rolling late, end up winning that thing by 20, and you feel okay about that, but plenty to learn from as well in an opening night win that you probably imagined was going to come a little bit easier than that. Honestly, though, I was pretty impressed with Rio Grande. They actually go and play Creighton tomorrow, but they shot the 3-point ball pretty well. I was pretty impressed, to be fair, with Rio Grande. Now, definitely some things to clean up if you're in Nebraska. This is a team I'm going to be worried about all year in terms of shooting the basketball. 6 of 19 for the game, just 31%, which is, to be fair, is the same amount or the same percentage basically that Rio Grande shot, but Rio Grande went 13 for 41. There's a super high volume 3-point shooting team, and those threes really kept them in it for a long stretch. But, you got Brice Williams going 1 for 6. Really the only guy that shot it well for Nebraska was Connor Esigian off the bench. I'm going to worry about their shooting for most of the year, if I'm just being honest. I don't know where that's going to come from. Now, Brice Williams, I do think, is going to shoot better than that on his career. He's just under 40% from 3, although not on, he takes about 3 or 4 a game. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see if, as what appears to be the focal point of the Nebraska offense, as Brice Williams had 27 last night and was the only Cornhusker in double-digit field goal attempts and by a wide margin there. It's going to be interesting to see if he's able, as the primary focal point of an offense, to continue being as efficient as he had been in the past with his shooting from three-point range, because that's going to be pretty key. You're going to need some guys that you don't consider pure shooters to shoot the ball well in order for Nebraska to have enough shooting. And ironically enough, it's something that I think is true for Creighton as well, is you're going to have guys that you don't consider pure shooters, like a Pop Isaacs, that are going to have to shoot the ball well at a 38 to 41% clip, somewhere in there, for the team to be as dynamic offensively as they want to be. So that's something to keep an eye on. Asijan shot the ball well, 3 for 4 from three-point range coming off the bench. So that'll be, if he's able to shoot it well all year, that'll be a big help. But keep an eye on these guys that are maybe not considered traditional shooters for Nebraska and, frankly, for Creighton as well. And that will go a long way in determining, I think, how these teams, these teams' ceilings are going to be offensively and ultimately as a team as well. One thing I was super encouraged by with Brice Williams was, we asked this question, I think DB and I asked this question, does Brice Williams know how good he is or how good he can be? It seemed like he was pretty assertive last night, which I really was encouraged by, because if Nebraska is going to be, a tournament team or really anything else this year, Brice Williams is going to have to level up a couple steps in terms of his aggressiveness, in terms of who he is as a basketball player. And I think the abilities are there to do it. DB and I have been pretty high on Brice Williams for at least a year now. And his ability to understand who he is, what he's capable of, I think will go a long way in this last stretch of his college career. He's a pretty dynamic guy. I really like his game. He's able to do a lot of different things offensively in terms of sort of scoring at 3 levels. And I think that's going to be really key for Nebraska going out through the season. But college basketball is tipped off. I'm super excited about it. Creighton tips off tomorrow, which is, I think, the latest anybody starts their season. Again, they'll be playing that same Rio Grande team that Nebraska played last night. It'll be interesting to see how the games play out differently, whether Nebraska's, I don't want to say struggles, but whether Nebraska having that thing played close was more to do with Rio Grande being maybe better than most people expect versus just maybe an off night for Nebraska trying to find their way in a post-Keisei Tominaga world. There were some upsets last night in college basketball as well, which is always fun to get things kicked off with a little bit of an interesting start there. One of them was certainly not in the marquee matchup of the night, where Gonzaga just beat the doors off of Baylor. That was pretty unexpected, at least from my point of view. I was actually very excited to stay up and watch that one, and then I was wondering what I was doing with my life almost immediately. I don't know. I mean, DB's always staying up late to watch things.
Well,
so.
I couldn't even get a text response. I had to call you this morning to make sure you were good.
That's my bad. I saw it, and
No, it's all good. I mean, it's cool. It's cool.
You just sometimes the brain's like, oh, cool, and then you put the phone down and it's gone from your brain forever.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're still on hoops.
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Todd calls
How about a crazy night? I know it's early.
It is, but there was some.
Oh boy.
Even the ones that ended up like there was a lot of games like the Nebraska game where close late, like Elon in North Carolina were like that.
Oh yeah,
Like
they made their little run,
and then you see the margin, and you're like, oh yeah, you would expect a 20-point win. It's like that's not how that game went.
Yeah. So the funny thing about like early season hoops is that you immediately ask yourself, all right, is this sustainable?
Yeah.
Like we just automatically go there. Like I know Cadeau's not going to shoot 3 or 4 from 3.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm like, oh man, could Elliott be a good shooter?
Yeah. But
it is interesting too because I used to coach a player in my former life at Omaha North whose since was shot. But his name was Ilan, and we just called him Phoenix. And there's only two, like me and my CR, the coach who coincidentally coaches at Westview. We're the only two that were that knew that. Yeah. Everybody just called him Phoenix, and I don't think anybody knew why. So it was crazy to watch these clunkers.
Yeah, you had a lot of good teams not look very good for a long stretch of their game.
Yeah, Big East.
Providence.
Yeah, so that it's way obviously early.
Yes,
it's Providence. I just don't know if they're going to score.
Yeah, well, and I wasn't enamored with Providence last year either.
I wasn't either, but if they guard and can turn, how did we get into hoops already? Because I have a lot of hot takes. Because I'm
just excited.
I'm
being honest.
I like basketball too.
I really like college.
You're talking to. I like all sports, so I don't care what I can talk. I'm going to talk about them all, but I'm a big college basketball nerd. Yeah, and I like that because I like hoops.
Yeah.
And Jim, my guy, so if I'm gonna recruit new friends, because I had to get rid of a lot of old ones, so I'm down to 4. I think I'm gonna go get old Nedro at Indian Creek.
Oh, he's a good dude. He's a cool dude.
I kind of like the way he thinks.
He's one of the guys I look forward to seeing out there every year.
Yeah, and he hid from me. How about both days when I went looking for him? And everybody's like, "Oh no, there's no telling where he's gonna be." I was like, yeah, I ain't walking around. I'm already getting killed out here.
Bombarded.
Yeah. But he was quick to send me. And yeah, Jim, I know it's coming with Carolina and Kansas.
Yeah.
So
Kansas is kind of making the rounds this year. I like it.
Yeah.
Coming up here to Omaha.
They got a lot of versatility.
They do.
I wonder how they're going to play.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kansas is sort of – not that they're not recruiting at a super high level, because they are, but they're sort of trying to put a mix together of older guys.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, too, with hoops, because we've seen it in football with guys, able to flip your team in a hurry. I think college basketball and continuity's kind of been hurt by the portal, in my opinion, which I think is going to take some time. It may be why you have some slow starts. It may not be as much balance as, these guys got to just figure out how to play together.
Yeah, I was wondering that last night when I'm watching, Seton Hall only win by 4 against St. Peter's. And
take your pick in the Big East.
Yeah, I mean.
Butler was a big fave, weren't they?
Yeah, over Missouri State. And then DePaul needs an overtime thriller to beat Southern Indiana, which is DePaul, so you kind of I
don't know. They finally get a good coach?
I think Chris Holman's a good coach.
Me too.
But I don't know. You ever have those jobs where you're I don't know if a good coach could overcome that program? I don't know if that's what DePaul is at this point.
Well, I know one. You better hope it's not.
Nebraska?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware. I knew when I said it.
You typically do. You're a little. I was listening to you yesterday.
It was
You're
hard.
a little snarky son of a gun. I'm gonna be like, I gotta be like, put 'em up. But it's funny. I like guys that can just take it and keep on moving. You didn't blink. You don't even blink. It's like, yeah. So I don't know. We had Big Red reaction yesterday to another presser, and I walked through it. So, and I didn't really talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a former player right as the presser started. So I was like, hey, let's listen together. I'll get back with you. But sometimes it's not fun talking to him because he thinks a lot like me.
Mm.
So, and I don't always want that if I need to, because sometimes I need to.
Yeah, you need to see a different perspective.
Yeah, but he thinks a lot like me. And we came out yesterday with, I don't want to speak for him, but I guess I can because I haven't said his name. We came out with 3 things.
Okay.
Do you like how we just seamlessly transition off basketball?
Hey, I was ready for it.
I wanted to get to Nebraska, but it's fine.
We can always get back to it.
So I came out. I got 3 things, and it's all going to center around accountability.
Okay.
All right. Now this is trying to. Not going to get into the player psyche yet, right? Because clearly I'm aware. You know what I mean. So I'm not. Let's not talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Yesterday's press conference struck me as a guy that knows what he wants to do, just hasn't done it yet. Like it's implementing. But I do think he left us breadcrumbs, right? Hey, I'm evaluating where I'm at, what I can do differently, my leadership style. I'm evaluating, coaches and players. Fine, we got all that out of the way. That's that's a big part of the accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, you can tell he's chomping at the. So he doesn't ever name names,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he would really like to.
Yeah.
And so he sounded like a guy. This is just me. He sounded like a guy that had addressed his team before the presser and was like, I'm not probably going to throw you guys under the bus, but I am going to hint a little bit. Because he seemed conflicted. The principal, Coach Rhule, is like, I'm not just going to bust roll my guys. But at the end of the day, when you look at some things on film, you're like, you're not coached to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's the age-old question, my dude. It's, if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it. So how hard-headed are we versus how proactive do I need to be?
Mm.
So he sounded like a guy that was clearly I think he's frustrated.
Yeah.
He
said he was.
He's frustrated.
Yeah.
And so you heard a little bit of the duality in the message, but he's if you'd have given him the mic much longer,
mm-hmm.
he might have actually went there, because some guys do need to be called out. They just do.
So
there's
a real thin line between throwing guys under the bus and holding them accountable
mm-hmm.
publicly.
Yeah. Right? So we're not gonna do the whole throw guys under the bus, but what I do think he's got to do is, you've empowered your staff to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
They have some autonomy. You defer, you trust. You want to make sure that your hires are what you thought they were. But now you're in the assessment period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's across the board. Not only are they doing the job that you've asked them to do,
mm-hmm.
how's their room?
Yeah.
How's
their room being held accountable?
That's where we're at.
Because
he said something. Shane, play the clip where he said, he basically talked about, I'm happy to talk to parents. If you want to, I'm all for, guys, whatever. But if you get out there, you better play. Do you know what clip that is?
I believe it was the one I played in the intro.
Yeah, play, I want you to get inside this real quick as you listen to what Coach Rhule said, and it's very atypical
mm-hmm.
of how Coach Rhule would handle something, because I don't think he wanted to go there,
mm-hmm.
but I do know that this is on his mind.
Yeah, but there, Shano.
I believe this. I've always believed this. Players win games. I try to do a good job of protecting the players, but at some point, like, you got to go out there and play. You got to go out there and make the plays. You got to go out there and do what you're capable of. I'm not, I've been here a year and a half now, 2 years almost. I'm not doing I'm afraid to make a mistake. I'm afraid, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, I just want the guys that want to go out and compete. We got enough of them. I want them to go out and fly around and compete. You're going to make mistakes out there. Yeah, this is what life is, right? Like, you hit adversity. If you quit, then so be it. I want the grown men out there. I'm happy to talk to everyone's parents. I'm happy to have personal one-on-one meetings. But at the end of the day, when the ball's snapped, you better play. And that's what these weeks are for. To go out there and establish who you are. So great opportunity for some of the young guys. To go out there, and I keep bringing up like Jacory and Vincent and Shavers and those guys. Like, when the ball snapped, they play. Point blank, they play. It might not always be right, but they play and they play and they play. And so, catch our breath this week. We'll practice for USC and we'll go out there and we'll compete.
He's not talking to us.
100%. And here's the issue.
He's not talking to us. That's a guy talking to some players on his team that
100%.
that aren't really either.
He's not talking to the young guys
with the agenda. Well, he could be.
Maybe some of them.
Could be. There's a couple that come to mind.
Yeah,
but
we brought one up yesterday, like Prince Will. That's a super talented guy that we haven't seen lately.
Oh yeah,
that has been.
You
can see it in
games. It could be any number of guys. Sure. It could be, Yeah, it could be any number of guys.
Yeah, we went through a list yesterday of older guys that I thought weren't playing as well as they should, or should be are expected to based on their talent level and how long they've been here, and that to me is the problem with. So I think we have to get into the player psychology part of it, because you mentioned something earlier of, hey, you're not being coached to do this, and then people go, oh, it must be being allowed then. What if it's not, though? Like, what if in practice this isn't happening?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the player psychology part of this comes into play, because you might be – we talked about it with the kickers earlier in the season, right? What if all week you're seeing the things you're supposed to see, and then on Saturdays for some reason, on game day for some reason, they are unable to make that same thing show up?
Yeah.
What do you do then? Do you bench the guy that's practicing right all week?
Mm-hmm.
Do you bench the guy that's performing well 6 days out of the week? Because that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do as a coach, to see a guy that's like, hey, I've got a guy that's clearly the number one 6 days out of the week, but the day that matters, there's a disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really hard to bench that guy as a coach, because not only are you benching a guy for someone who's not performing as well in practice, not to say they're not performing at all, but they're not performing as well in practice, you're also kind of sending a signal that, like, hey, I know this guy's about all the right things and we see it from him 6 out of 7 days a week, but he's not cashing in when it matters.
Yeah, so there's this part of me that thinks that could be staff too.
100%.
It just listening, right?
And that's why I think it matters that he's talking about, well, he's evaluating everybody. He's evaluating the staff. He's evaluating the players. Because I think you're right. I think it could be the staff as well. Like, what if, I mean, Marcus Satterfield is the one that gets all the hate, right? What if Marcus Satterfield during the week, you're like, man, I love the game prep. I love the stuff we put in. He talked about it yesterday. He's like, I don't really have a problem with the individual plays, because that's stuff we all do during the week together, and you kind of like where it goes, right? What if that's different on Saturday? Like, that's really hard too.
Yeah, I've missed that.
That's something that I think there's a lot in this press conference. We can keep getting to it. Because I think there's a lot in. I think he told us a lot yesterday. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. The YouTube chat is already popping off in a hurry. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. There's a thing about consistency that he said there that kind of like, I don't know if it was like a little trigger or something, but I kind of started to feel some kind of way. I know that we think we want consistency, and on some level we do, but we want consistent excellence, right? He's right. They were consistent last year. On offense, they were consistently really, really bad. Like, that's part of the thing we're so frustrated by this year, is we've seen this offense look better this year. We saw them in the first half against Colorado. We saw them in the second half against Purdue. We saw them for large stretches execute really well against Illinois. We've seen them be better. That's part of the frustration, is like, yeah, you can be consistent, but consistently bad doesn't really get you anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird angle that I like, or that I have, but because you never want to see anybody you care about struggle.
Sure.
But so the good thing about this, if you're kind of a glass half full guy, is I think Coach Rhule has to go through the strain a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think part of the growth isn't isolated to just assistant coaches, coordinators, and players. Like, I think sometimes your leadership has to go through it so they can sharpen their skills too. I said this earlier, and this may surprise you that this is my stance, but I remember early on in the when he first got hired, I said, you have to be careful that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to surround yourself with people that have built-in checks and balances. Coach Rhule has a personality that will allow you to think to yourself, he's got it. This isn't new. Like,
no, 100%.
For as much as you know what I mean? So for as much as I like him, I still know human behavior, right? And it's natural. It's not specific to a particular individual. It is people in general.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the very first questions that I asked him in the first little 90 minutes or however long we sat down when we were outside and we were inside and we were in the weight room, this is a couple years ago. And I said, hey, how do you draw the line between I've done this before, I kind of have some know-how, versus I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm willing to adapt?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that was like a legit question. And so I think for him to be processing how he thinks and bringing in a couple of outside people for perspective is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
The
Because
self-eval.
yeah, that lets me know. Because his core is legit. Like, I mean, I'm riding with that guy all day long.
Yeah.
I know what he's about because he has 3 characteristics. He's other-centered. He's competitive, and he has good self-awareness. Like, you just give me those 3 things.
I'll take my chances on everything
in
else.
anything.
Yeah.
Like I'm in.
I'll take my chances on everything else.
He has all those 3 things, but he knows the most.
Yeah.
And with that can come some unintended consequences.
Especially if you don't surround yourselves with people that are willing to be like, hey, I know in general you're smarter than me, but I think I'm right on this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
yes. So let's go back to, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like that's sort of the dynamic we have sometimes. Like, you know more about football than I do, but sometimes I will sit here and like stand on business. And sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes you'll be like, that's a good point.
Yeah. It happens it doesn't matter what the topic is. It happens all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like, I could come in with a thought process, and believe me, I'm listening. The YouTube chat sometimes drives me crazy. The same 3 people beat their chest over the same 3 things, but occasionally
sometimes they'll come over and be like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way.
I'll learn. You know what I mean?
You learn something.
So that's okay, and it's good for me. Well, some people, they ask all the time. My staff at Westside, because it's like this caring society. Like, hey, you good? You need anything? Like, that's just how we operate, right?
Yeah.
And it's always, man, I don't know how you do it. And I always, my response is usually always the same. 95% of the time, it's good for me.
Yeah.
It's good for me, right? Like, it's not, I don't want to just surround myself with people that agree.
Yeah.
Right? Which is sometimes why I like.
But it's hard.
Which sometimes why I gravitate towards people that you'd think like.
Yeah, that I'm like, DB, why do you mess with that person?
You like that dude?
Yeah.
Well, quietly, like, I admire some of the traits that they have.
Sure.
That I don't have. So I gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
Like, that's just
100%. And you're willing to look past more than I am.
100%.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm going to try to tell myself, okay, if I need to rip the cord, I can. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go to Coach Rhule, because this is interesting, because I didn't even know this until I'm watching him go through it. Because I heard a guy yesterday that was clearly frustrated. And he was struggling. I'm like, okay, this is good, because you have all the makeup to pull through this. You got to go through a little bit of pruning, because that's what he believes. Right? It's like that thing where you can't give grace if you've never received grace.
Yeah.
So
you don't know what it looks like.
As he's struggling internally with, man, I know this. Like, let me take a look. So now you have to go back and you say, oh, I like this originally because I thought it would be this. I like this guy originally because I thought it would be this. It's not really happening that way, but why?
Yeah.
Where were my blind spots?
Where's the disconnect?
Right.
Yeah. And what do I need now, and can that person provide?
Because at the end of the day, he has one characteristic that I told you that I wish I had, that I absolutely love. He can cut you off at the knees and know that it's good for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he can move on in a hurry.
Which is something I do.
Like,
yeah.
And that's kind of the reason we get along.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know it's like, man, not very nice. But it's okay, because sometimes I wish I had that in me too.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, say all that to say, like, that part is good for him. Like, you just need that 10%.
Yeah.
You just need that 10% to give you a clear vision of what's going on around you. Then you can reinvest in your coaches from a different angle to get the desired outcome. Now, it may not work. I don't even know. right?
And it may not be with some of these coaches.
But in the meantime,
frankly. Yeah.
I mean, you got to let them hang.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So I liked yesterday. This is weird and warped, but I'm telling you, being cut, I've been relieved from a job, and the guy's still my best friend. Like, I told you, Nada was like, man, you got it. This may not be for you.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan. I'm a cheer for you. And I'm like, damn, that hurts.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's hard to believe that person in that moment, too.
Oh, my parents were so hurt. I'm like, nah, he's fine. Like,
yeah.
I'm telling you, I ran my mouth. Like,
it's like, no, we're cool. Like, we're cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so.
That's hard, though.
Oh, yeah.
In the moment, that's really hard.
And I struggled for like the next, yeah. So I like this part because of the makeup. So then you go to the staff. Then the staff is like, oh, shoot. The head man said this. Now I've got to do this in my room. Shake the tree, see what falls, get rid of the rest.
Yeah.
Like, just do it. Like, rip it open now.
Rip the Band-Aid.
And do it, because the 85% of the core of what you believe is good.
Yeah. You got to prune the 15% that's not.
Yep. And he's realizing that, going through that process now. This place is different. I don't care what anybody says. This environment is different. It's easy to get into bad habits.
We'll talk Penn State with Rich Scarcella coming up next. Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Rich Scarcella. He covers Penn State football for the Reading Eagle. Rich, how are you this morning?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm well. How are you guys?
Good. Hanging in there. It's almost like 6 degrees of separation, except you have more wins and have had more wins. It doesn't sound like they come against the right opponents. Are Penn State fans over the kind of the emotional explanations from Coach Franklin?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, it's only Tuesday, and the game was 3 days ago. So, oh, you mean in general?
Yes.
I think Ohio State losing to Ohio State 8 straight times is something that sticks in the craw of every Penn State fan. Some are really hard on Franklin.
Yeah.
Some are okay. When are we going to get over the hump? And others are kind of like, look, he rebuilt this program. It was in bad shape, after the scandal, and they've been a pretty consistent, program, especially since his third year, after the scholarships were back intact. So it's mixed, but I know this. I know the fan base is very tired of losing to Ohio State, no matter what the talent gap is.
So, Rich, I kind of it's ironic that Penn State and Ohio State played on Saturday, because I kind of look at Ohio State and Penn State in terms of their head coaching positions in a similar light. Obviously, two guys that win a ton, but just doesn't seem to be quite enough for either Ryan Day or James Franklin. I guess what is, I know a couple years ago when they came off the 4-5 COVID and then the 7-6 2021 year, that things got a little heated for James Franklin in Happy Valley there. Like, is that in danger of kind of the heat getting turned up on him again? Or is it at the end of the day going to be, hey, they're probably going to be in the playoff and everybody's going to sort of forget about this until the Ohio State game next year or next time?
Well, there are people who aren't going to like James Franklin no matter what happens on the football field.
Yeah.
That's fact. That just is. If they go 11-1 and get a home playoff game, does that, gain favor with him? I think people will. I mean, it's hard to say you went 11-1 and you didn't think it was a good season. I mean, it's really hard for that to happen. I think this would be a 10-win season would be, I think it's, 7th in 9 years, which is, there's not a lot of programs in the country that have had 7 10-win seasons in 9 years. But I think, going 11-1, I think some people would be satisfied with that. They wouldn't be thrilled because of the loss to Ohio State and how much there was to gain from beating Ohio State. But I wrote in the beginning of the season or before the season, it might seem like a low bar now, but they absolutely have to make the college football playoff. Like that's it. If you don't make the playoff, then it's a failure. The season's a failure, and that's just the way it is now. Now their margin of error has been reduced because I'm not sure how many teams with a 10-2 record are going to get in the playoff. None of us knows that because there's so much football left to be played. But I think if Penn State stumbles in its last 4 games, they're going to be favored in all 4. Then I think the heat will be turned up. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, let me ask you, who needs to get it going, in your opinion, to get Penn State over the hump? I get it, right? Ohio State was really stingy against the ground game on Allen and Singleton, and I don't know about the relationship with Drew and Penn State. Like, he puts up good numbers, but he always seems to get a but, which is weird for somebody who takes as good a care of the football as he typically does. Who needs to get over the hump, in your opinion, for Penn State to kind of turn the corner against talented teams?
Right, like Ohio State and like Michigan. I mean, they're 3-3 against Michigan, except they lost their last 3. And they don't play Michigan this year. But I get your point. Here's the difference. Saturday, Drew Aller wasn't the problem. Their receivers couldn't get open. Ohio State's secondary is very, very good, and they're very physical. And
yeah, we saw that. Yeah, they are.
yeah, and guess what? They're going to continue to be physical as long as referees let them play. And I don't. That's not a complaint, or that's not a a gripe or anything. You have to learn to play through that. You've got to figure out a way. But Penn State's wide receivers have been an issue these last 2 seasons, and Penn State doesn't have a Jahan Dotson, a KJ Hamler, a Chris Godwin. Their receivers, they don't have an elite receiver. They didn't have one last year, and they don't have one this year. That's the first problem. And I think the offensive line played well early on this season, but they replaced 3 starters who are all in the NFL. And when you go up against a defensive front like Ohio State, they fell short. And you saw that on the goal line in the 4th quarter.
We're talking to Rich Scarcella of the Reading Eagle covering Penn State football. Rich, I've wondered this about Penn State a lot. This is a team that, people put in the same category as Ohio State and as Michigan, and kind of in that blue blood status. And yet I look at them and I go, okay, outside of that, 5-year stretch in the 80s, they don't have any national championships, even though they've been a really good program for a really long time. Like, what are fan expectations for this program? Is it they have to get to a national championship? Because that's what it is at Ohio State. But historically, those are kind of different programs. I'm just curious what it's like there.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think you brought up a great point. Penn State, right or wrong, Penn State hasn't won a national championship since 1986. You guys know what happened in 94. Nebraska was number 1. Penn State was number 2. They didn't play each other. Both were undefeated. Nebraska got voted the national championship. You can argue that all you want. It doesn't matter. The point is, so Penn State was 12-0 that season. They won the Rose Bowl. But that's 30 years ago. No matter what. That's 30 years ago. And I think there's I don't want to say it's an unreal expectation, but there's an expectation of James Franklin, like, when are you going to bring us the national championship? And they're not there yet. They're not that close. And you brought up a good point. While they may be one of the top, 8-9 programs in the country in terms of tradition and success, they're not in that top 5. They're not. They might be a top 10 program, but they're not a top 5 program. And it'll take, you can't have weaknesses and because Ohio State exposed them with the wide receivers, with the offensive line last Saturday. You asked me a question about Drew Aller, and I want to go back to that. If Drew Aller had Ohio State's receivers, if Drew Aller had, a couple of us said this during the Peach Bowl, if he had Ole Miss's receivers, Penn State would maybe be unstoppable. The offense would be unstoppable. I mean, I think he's that good. I do. I just don't see the wide receivers, stepping up or having the talent that you need to compete at the very highest level.
It's interesting. Because his record says yes, because he beats teams on the schedule that you would, for all intents and purposes, say he should beat. But maybe time wears on Coach Franklin. Is he built temperamentally to be able to say, okay, stay right here in the moment. We don't have the next big opportunity until, and then fill in the blank, because you have to kind of stay in the moment as a head coach to keep consistency. But I get the sense people are waiting on the next benchmark for vindication. It's odd.
Well, it's right. It's not just the next. The next benchmark is beating Ohio State. That's what it amounts to. I mean, Ohio State, despite Michigan's success the last few years, to me is still, and the fact that they lost by 1 point at Oregon last month, I still think Ohio State's the gold standard in the Big Ten right now. And you've got to find a way to beat them. And that's the thing. Like you're this close. I mean, they're 2 first downs at the 3-yard line and get no points close to beating Ohio State on Saturday. So do you there are fans who want to see they don't want to see Franklin coach Penn State anymore. There are fans, and I think it's a minority of fans. But if you do that, you better be careful who you're bringing in. There are only 3 coaches in this country who have won national championships, active coaches. And you're not getting any of those 3. One is probably going to retire this year, Mac Brown. It's a balance here. And I think that's the thing that frustrates Penn State fans. You're so close, but you're still not there. And that's the thing. I mean, they're, like I said earlier, they're a top 10 program, but they're not a top 5 program. And they have to prove that. And will they do it if they get in the playoff? Will they do that? I don't know. I mean, can they get to a semifinal? I guess it depends on the matchups. So it'll be interesting. But I mean, I think that's what it is. It's a great question. That's what it is. People are waiting for the next benchmark, and I think the next benchmark could be making the playoff, having a home playoff game, and winning that game. Maybe that would be it. It would be a step forward. But like I said, I still don't think it would satisfy his most ardent critics.
Yeah, that's Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle. Rich, we appreciate the time, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Rich.
Anytime, guys. Thanks very much.
More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. You look like you feel some kind of way about what we just heard.
I think he told you all you needed to know. I mean, we can parse through it, and we can guess, and we can speculate. I hear, hey, listen, I'm going to ask that this is what I want, right? I think I've been loyal to you guys. I feel for you guys. I appreciate the fact that you bought in and you rallied with me. Even though I know you have some bad habits that creep up in crunch time, you've tried to give me the best you have.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to see you through this because you've helped me grow this culture. But make no mistake, I'll move on.
Yeah.
I'll do what I have to do to move this thing forward. That's Coach. He said, I hope the coaches will join me. If you think that it is rainbows and butterflies when you're taking hard evaluations.
Mhm.
Now you can say, well, it's his fault it's gotten to this point. He told you that.
Yeah.
He told
I
you.
got to evaluate myself.
He told you that.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. I hope the players will join me. Hey man, it's up to you.
Mhm.
I'm going. This is where I want to go. You can come with me, or you cannot. It's up to you. Because he's not a headlock guy.
He's not going to force you.
You know people like that though.
Yeah.
I said he's got this weird ability to be able to walk away, but you still know he cares. I've said that from day one. It is this uncanny skill set he has. I mean, I want the best for you. No, like, why would you guys argue with me? You think I'm not for you?
Yeah.
You think I haven't been to NFL combines? You think I can't talk to every general manager in the country? You've like I've built things before. Like just don't fight me on it.
Yeah.
Now that comes with he's not a finished and refined product either.
Right.
So he's got to grow and adapt along the way too, even though the core even though the core of the makeup is really strong. But he's telling you.
Well, that's where the trust comes in, right? Because
like you can hear right, wrong, or indifferent. And we can be mortified like it doesn't happen, but I mean you can go to almost any program in the country. When you hear, hey, stop the infighting, the blaming, the finger pointing, because it's a natural byproduct when of losing.
Yeah.
It's what losers do.
Yeah.
So that's the BCD, the blaming, complaining, deflecting it's just a natural byproduct. That's why I said yesterday morning, start with accountability. Head coach, you want to hear it again? You could probably know it now.
Head coach, coach coordinators.
Yep.
Coordinators, coach position coaches, position coaches, coach players.
And anything outside of that is
gravy. Here.
He's telling you.
There's a couple things there that I think are really interesting. First, I think two things can be true at once, right? It could be on him that they're in this position. I also think he may have understood that this day was coming.
Yeah.
Where, hey, I believe these guys can help me build the culture. I don't know if these guys are going to be the ones that help me win.
I almost get the sense. It's interesting. Because I almost got the sense yesterday, and I was talking to my former teammate. He's chomping at the bit, I think, because how he's been held accountable has been very public, right? And it's worked in some instances with him. But what was he kind of very protective of? Well, these guys could be a meme in 2 minutes. They could be. So you got the sense it impacted him one way. So he wanted to make sure that the people that he cared about don't feel like that.
He wanted to protect them from the negative implications
because he knows how it feels. Because he knows how it feels.
But sometimes by doing that, you also
enable.
Well, and you prevent them from experiencing the positive implications of it, right?
I'm going to call it enabling for short.
Sure.
Because it's such a fine line. It sounds like that yesterday sounded like somebody that said, hey, listen, man, I'm going to go out and I'm going to eat this because I'm the head coach and that's what I do.
That's my job.
In the same vein, I don't want to bus roll you guys. And he had to manage the duality of that message. He did. Because it kept creeping out.
Yeah, you kind of see both sides.
Yeah,
of it, right?
it just.
Well, that's why.
So there's lots of there has to be lots of things going on, right? Like you don't bring in parents. I'm happy to talk to parents if that's not an issue. You don't bring up like the finger pointing if you don't foresee that being an issue.
Yeah.
You don't bring up coaches. Hey, I hope you come along. If that's not, he got it. He covered the gamut. But at the end, hey, make no mistake, we're going to get there. And I'm telling you guys.
So that's what I liked.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Because it would be really easy in that moment to not double down on, hey, we're going to get this thing going.
Me too. I'm 100% with you.
Because it's really easy, even if he believes that internally, it's really easy to not put that out there because you're like, you could take some heat for it again, right? It's like, I lost 3 in a row. People are freaking out whether they're going to make a bowl game again or not. Like that, it's really easy just to be like, I don't have to say that part. I can say all these other things that could be true, and I don't have to say that part, which is part of the reason you bring up accountability, and I think it's important. It's one of the, I've said this a million times, it's one of the only things I care about. Accountability and self-awareness are 2 of the only things I care about because I think they go hand in hand, right? It's really hard to be held accountable or to hold others accountable unless you're self-aware. But one of the things that I really like about Rhule is he puts things out there that allow others to hold him accountable. Yeah. Like he says things out loud.
He seemingly boxes himself in.
Yes, he talks himself into a corner. So it's like, if I'm not who I think I am, or if I'm not who I say I am,
and I don't know, like
you're going to be able to
sometimes,
come after me.
like he is historically has been a guy that runs into the burning building,
runs into the fire,
right? So I think that's what he thinks has forged him the most. So it's what he wants to do. It's what he wants other people to go through. That's why he likes to thrive in chaos.
But he's also find guys that are willing to do it too.
And he's a protector by nature.
Yeah.
So because he's a protector by nature, he comes in conflict. So that's why you can gravitate towards a guy like Jamar. He likes those tough stories. Like guys, that's why he and Jamar are so close, right? But I look at this. Tell me what you think about this, because this is interesting.
Real quick before you get to it.
Go ahead, babe.
So I think there's a really distinct difference here. And this is why I bring up player mentality so much with this particular coaching staff, because I agree with you. He wants to protect guys. He also wants them to run into the burning building.
Yep.
But he's not going to force them.
He's going to train you to be able to go into the building first.
He's going to train you to want to run into the building. Yeah. He's not going to say, hey, you have to run into the building. Right?
I agree.
So that's the key difference there is he's not going to like put you on his back and drag you into the burning building.
That's the parsing through, hey, man.
Yeah.
This may not be for you.
Right. Like he's going to protect you, but in protecting you, at some point, you're going to have to want to run into the building. And that's where I think there's a disconnect between these current players who I think love and respect and want to be.
Yeah, they've been treated better
with him.
Cultural development than anything that they've been accustomed to.
And I think that he wants to continue to protect them, but I think he also is starting to realize these guys aren't going to choose to run into the building on their own.
Why do you think he uses Ja'Cory Barney and like Jalen Lloyd as examples?
And Shavers. Brought up Shavers yesterday too. Like those are guys that are running into the building.
Okay. So what do you think about this? Coach Rhule, he's got the wrong guys wearing single digits to do what he wants to do. You're holding up wildly inconsistent players as the representation of the team and then complaining that the team is inconsistent. Watch Minnesota play. All the guys that pop for them, who make big plays in the moment, have a C on their chest.
Yeah, I've heard the single-digit thing brought up a lot. I have. And I don't totally know what to do with it.
Okay, let me just ask you this, generally speaking. Of inconsistencies, guys that have been inconsistent, that you're thinking about their mental makeup, are they wearing single digits?
Yes. Yeah, most of them.
That's what made me think of it. Because I know the names that you said to me yesterday.
Yeah, I said them on air. I said them to everybody. Right? I'll say them again. Gifford, Singleton, Ty, Nash, those Banks.
Tommy Hill.
That's 6 of them right off the top of my head there. Like those are guys that.
And I don't think when he told me, when he said this, I don't think he knew.
Yeah.
It's certainly not your sentiments, nor would I think that would sway him. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Because he didn't send me this until.
And you know what's funny? When I
12:45 yesterday.
Yeah. You know what's funny is when I said those names yesterday, I didn't even think about them as single-digit guys. I was just like, who are the guys that I don't think have performed to the level that I think they're capable of and that Nebraska needs them to?
And they're all old. And now this isn't an old versus
guys.
Young, but you can.
But if you're talking about player makeup, I do think it matters what you've been through.
If you're looking for consistency.
Yeah.
Right, because it's not blame, it's why are we wildly inconsistent? That's what I need to figure out, right? He said that.
Yeah.
So then when I read this message, I'm like, shoot. I sat on this pulling into the parking lot of West Side yesterday. I'm like, there's probably something to this.
Yeah.
But the players vote.
So I think that's part of the problem, right? Is the players, because there's a lot of older guys on this team. So there's a big divide, and I'm not saying there's division in the locker room, but I'm saying there's a gap. You've got a ton of older guys, and you got a ton of really young guys, and sort of this gap in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm. You can look at the roster, yeah.
Just look at the roster. Yeah, I'm not telling anything that the roster doesn't tell you, right? You have a ton of older guys, 5th and 6th year guys, a ton of 1st and 2nd year guys, right? The 1st and 2nd year guys, I don't have a ton of worries about in terms of who they are, who they're going to be, because these are guys that were recruited by Rhule. I think he knows what he's doing, right? These older guys, and here's the other thing you have to remember about a player's vote. So the older guys, they're going to vote for older guys, right? You're not going to vote most likely for true freshmen or sophomores or redshirt freshmen to be single-digit guys or captains or whatever. That's not a common thing. It's probably not going to happen, okay? Plus, the other older guys don't know that what the Ties and Nash and Isaacs and Deshaun's and Tommy's and Jamal Banks, they don't know that what they're doing isn't going to lead to winning football because they haven't had winning football. They don't know yet.
Yeah.
And whereas the young guys, whether they're coming from their high school programs or they've coming from other places, they sit there and go, maybe that's not it, but maybe they defer to the older guys because if you're a true freshman, maybe you're not voting for another true freshman to have a single-digit number, right? You're like, oh, man. And again, if you're a true freshman, you haven't played with those guys yet either. So you don't know that what they're doing isn't going to lead to winning football either. You're sitting there and go, oh, man, Isaac works his ass off. Deshaun goes super hard every day in practice.
The one single-digit offensive guy?
Yeah, Jamal goes.
Insert what you just said, right?
Super hard in practice. He goes hard in the weight room. He's good to all the guys. You're like, oh, that feels like a captain, right? You don't look because you don't know yet. You haven't. If you're a true freshman or even redshirt freshman, you're sitting there and you go, oh, I don't know that's not like that's only part of it, right? Those are all good qualities to have, but you need some guys on there that, for lack of a better term, are kind of killers. You need some guys on there that have your Mamba mentality that are like, yeah, I may not be the nicest guy, but we will get where we're going. Mm-hmm. You need some guys on there that willingly run into burning buildings. And here's the funny thing. This is why I think there's inconsistency, and it's not just bad, right? It's not all burning buildings are built equally, right? Like some fires are bigger than others. I think there's some guys, some of these older guys, they'll run into the little fires. They've gotten to that point. Coach Rhule's got them to the point where like, yeah, we'll run into a little fire. Just that one room's in fire, and there's I got to go get the dog from this other room. I'm okay because that's over there, and I'm over there, and I can go get it. But it still feels a little warm, so I feel like I'm doing something. Like, who's running in when the whole house is engulfed, right? Because right now, that's the young guys. Right now, it's your Shavers and your Barneys and those guys that are like, hey, like, I don't care if that building's on fire. I got to go get my dog. I don't care if I get burned on the way in and on the way out. I'm going to get the thing I care about.
The funny thing about that analogy, which I agree with, and it's kind of like, you know, I was talking to this former player yesterday, and he's like, man, the hard part is, and he said this, and I don't think he's listening to the show per se, but, you know, I'm like, because I said this last week, is the hard part is you have some goals that are still intact.
Yeah.
The fine line is knowing what to scrap and when to go young, because you don't want to go all the way young. Mm-hmm. But then he kind of gassed me up yesterday. He's like, in some of these spots, like, let guys that'll just rally. And he sent me where he talked through these cut-ups to go look at. Mm-hmm. Where he talking about effort. I know DJ Moore is famous this morning for his effort, but whether it's guys turning down tackles or whatever,
just whatever it is, yeah.
It's like,
but effort stuff.
Yeah, yeah. He said I would start there.
Yeah. And here's the other thing about it, which I think is really interesting too, is it's probably not a conscious decision that older guys are making or that guys that aren't doing what needs to be done are making. it's probably a subconscious or an unconscious thing where they don't really even know that it's happening. But it's also, I think, an issue of you may not have to go, like you said, you may not have to scrap the whole thing.
Yeah.
If you get enough of those other personality types in there, there's what, I love my Malcolm Gladwell. Where's the tipping point, right? Where's the tipping point of, I got a bunch of dogs in this room now. I've got a bunch of guys that are going to fly around and be the guy I need them to be. And now all of a sudden the older guys are like, we can get behind that, right? Instead of the other way around.
I do know that there are a couple of young guys, a handful, that the older guys really like.
Yeah.
Really like.
And so if those are the same guys that you can put out there as the example of what you need, then maybe the older guys can rally around that and bring the rest of the team around to that as well, as opposed to it being the other way around where the older guys rally the younger guys.
Yeah, one of my buddies just asked, was it a red flag? I think this is rhetorical knowing him because he knows a lot. Was there a red flag that only one offensive player had a single digit?
Sure, we talked about this at the time.
We said it at the time.
We're like, it sort of made sense. We kind of tried to talk our way out of it, right? It's like, the defense is more experienced. We know what's going on there. But yeah, it was a red flag. Last year you had an offensive lineman that honorarily got one. You didn't have that this year.
And you didn't even love the way that he played.
No. You liked his mentality, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we're at with this program.
I wish he wouldn't have sent me that yesterday. I can't unread that now.
Yeah. Because, again, when I was
And he used the term consistency, which is something that was the theme.
Mm-hmm.
It is clear. It's what's driving the fan base crazy.
What's driving Coach Rhule crazy.
And it's what's driving Coach Rhule crazy.
And I bet if I'm being honest with you, I bet it's what's driving the young guys that aren't playing right now crazy too. Because they're like, I can go out there and be inconsistent.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm a young guy, if I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I know I'm faster than this guy.
If I'm like,
it's like I can go out there and be inconsistent.
If I'm Quinn or Keelan,
I can go out there and whiff on a block on the perimeter.
No, it's just what happens.
Yeah, like
it's not like that's. That's the nature. If you want to create a competitive
it's the nature of being competitive. There's always going to be somebody behind you.
At some point, I think you reward it and see what happens.
Yeah, you reward the competitiveness and quit relying on the experience because the experience hasn't got you where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
Like just be like,
I can think of some real. It's crazy.
Like just putting the cards on the table, right? The experienced guys haven't got you where you wanted to go, right? Even if let's give a pass on like Indiana looked how it looked, Ohio State they responded. UCLA is a game you have to win. If you're a good football team, you have to figure out a way to win that game.
Did you read JK's?
No, not yet. On YouTube?
Go to the bottom. He's tough. He is not messing around.
He's not wrong.
Nah,
he struggled. He struggled.
Yeah.
Right?
I think Josh is over it.
I get it. I get it. Because the inconsistency almost makes you more mad than ineptitude.
Yeah, and what you worry about is that it trickles down to the rest of the guys in your position group.
So that's why I think
that's what you have to worry. That's what you have to. Now that's on Coach Rhule though.
It is.
You listen. You gotta get your position.
That's why I feel like you have to kind of pull the ripcord now, so that you don't run the danger of this mentality seeping into the guys that don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Like you can't afford, and I'm going to call it this, and it's going to sound worse. You don't want the loser mentality to get infectious. Yeah. Let's get to our guy, Asian Wyatt here, wants to talk about some Gifford comments. Wyatt, what's going on, bud? What's happening, Shane?
Shane's not talking to his mic again, like we can hear him.
Let's pot up Asian Wyatt here, Shane. Wyatt, what's going on, bud?
Hey, just real quick. So I was thinking of what you guys are talking about, and one thing it just out of my head was after the Indiana loss in the post-game press conference, I think it was post-game, where Gifford was talking, and he says that, this wasn't my first, I guess paraphrasing, my first butt whooping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something about that, the way he said it just kind of bothered me a little bit. I was trying
a lot of people were mad about that. Mm. And then I got the whole that's your boy and this, that, and yeah, you're not alone, Wyatt. Keep going. I'm sorry.
That's all right. it's just that because when you say something like it's usually followed up with it wasn't my first whooping, but whooping won't be my last one. It just that's what you kind of that's what what I would hear in my ears, even though he didn't say it. But if he's saying that to him, he's a captain. What is he saying to the younger guys about that?
Did you like any of the follow-up context?
I can't recall it all, to be honest.
Okay. All right. I'm just that one I'm surprised that's the first time we heard that this week, to be honest. I appreciate the call, Wet.
Yeah.
Because I got that a lot.
About Gifford's post-game comments after Indiana? Yeah, at the time I kind of thought it was funny, like because he kind of says it in a way that's amusing.
But then I knew when it was serious because then I get I'm tired of his tough. I'm like, you're not gonna get me.
Yeah, and
it's at that point it's counterproductive.
This is not like, as far as I know, these are all good guys. They're good guys, and they're trying. And
nobody, people don't care.
But that doesn't mean that there's still not a problem.
Yeah, you want to win.
You can be as good of a guy as you want, and maybe not win enough.
Yeah.
Right? Coming up next, we're going to talk to Alexis Boulos from Union Omaha. Then we will get right back into Pete. Hold on, we'll get to you first, and then we'll get to Alexis Boulos of Union Omaha.
Pete, stay right there.
Right after this, here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Let's get to Pete. Had some thoughts on the coach's comments. Pete, what's going on, man?
I guess I want your opinion. When he's talking about the players and coaches, I think what he's talking about is the assistant coaches. When you put up with incompetence, then it seems to breed more incompetence. So I think what he's talking about is if the veteran's not doing their job, you need to replace him. And as an assistant coach, you need to make that call. And I think maybe he's kind of holding his assistants accountable for the play on practice and play during games to make moves to kids that are fully bought in.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Pete, that's a good call. I appreciate it.
To agree with that.
That's
what I was saying
with the autonomy.
Yeah,
right. Like you give them autonomy, but then you better do your job.
Yep.
And if you're going to start holding those coaches accountable, part of that is, hey, I need you to play the guys that are going to play.
Yeah, I'm on board with Pete.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
Because he goes, hey, I can do this with you or without you. Now, he didn't say it like that, but he said, make no mistake, I'm going to do what it takes. I'm not defeated. I'm frustrated. We will get this done.
I've got the exact quote right here. There's nothing I won't do to help us get over the top.
Yep.
Who do you think he's talking to there?
Yeah, I know. I'm with Pete on that one.
It's not me. He's not talking to me.
Yeah.
I think he's talking to people. The calls come from inside the house, bud.
Yeah.
Speaking of the call, we've got a call in to our friend Alexis Boulos, the GM of Union Omaha. And, we got a lot of West Siders in the building now. Alexis, what's going on?
You're such a hater.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good. After, you just keep moving on. I got to have you asked your guys, Alexis, are you like, hey, without the bye, I know you guys had it last year because you win a lot. Do you like this new format? Because it doesn't seem to matter. You got to win in the first round again. Like, do you like this new format?
The addition of the Jägermeister Cup was interesting. Since I don't have previous experience with it, I don't really have a feeling other than it was very, very busy. The schedule was packed. We had a lot.
Who needs a bye in the playoffs, right? It's like, let's just play.
Here's the thing: when you win the regular season and you get home field advantage, it feels really, really good.
Yeah, you're cool with that. Yeah, I get it.
Well, speaking of home field advantage, you got that win, as DB said, in round one, a 1-0 win. But it was a little emotional. I know it was a tough kind of weekend around Union Omaha because of some of the other stuff going on. Kind of just how did just organizationally you guys kind of navigate having this big, huge playoff match, but also kind of having some tragedy happen in house?
Yeah.
I'll be really honest. It was really challenging for the staff, for the players, obviously the technical staff, the coaches. We are a small family unit, and I would say from the moment that I heard about it, and Marty Cordero heard about it, Dom has communicating with us, and we kind of stopped promoting the match that was on Sunday. I mean, and we went into survival mode to try and get as many services and things that we could get together for the family, and kind of try to understand what was happening, because it all happened so quickly. And obviously our number one priority was making sure that that Meshach and his wife got the care that they need, and his cousin get the care that they need. So it's been tough, but the guys really, the leadership in the locker room, from Rashid, but from Dom and his whole staff, to bring everybody together and give them the confidence, but also, they enabled them to have their emotions and feel their feelings and put everything towards that match. And they wore the number 2, and everybody had their armbands with their special message to Mish and his family. And I think it was a really nice moment. Our supporters were there, but it was a really emotional match, especially at the end. It all kind of came to a head, and we won. And then it was like this kind of release of what everyone had been feeling for the last 72 hours.
And for those that don't kind of know what happened, Meshach Jerome and his family were injured in a home accident. You guys are providing ways that other people can help out as well, right? I mean, you've got, I think, a GoFundMe set up.
We do. We have a GoFundMe that's on our social media platforms. The family has also set up a GoFundMe. So there's venues through that platform. And then some of the coaches' wives and the players' wives are putting together an auction during the match for Saturday's game as well. So there's a lot of opportunity to give back. The Red Cross has been very helpful. We've spoken with Catholic Charities to get some services. So, the community is really, really helping, and, we're grateful to CHI Health Systems, and it's a community effort, and we appreciate everything that everybody is doing.
So this is interesting, because I think one of the unintended consequences sometimes through tragedies, you get a chance to watch people bond and rally and circle. It seems to embody, just as we get to talk to you every so often. We've known Marty forever. We know what the community brings. That you get to look at something like this as an opportunity to really show who and what your organization is when you get squeezed. You mentioned the wearing the bands, the number 2, the quick turnaround, the understanding the magnitude of the moment with compassion and who you support your team with. That it would be easy to take that for granted that that's what's supposed to happen. But when natural instincts kick in and you see the outpouring, that's a pretty unique group that you guys have that can just do it so naturally and free flowing.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. It is very natural instinct, right? Dom has an amazing relationship with every member of that team. And so it's a family. And so when something happens to your family, you react, right? And you want to make sure they're supported, and you want to make sure that their family members are supported. And as a mom, I go into mom mode, right? And it was like, okay, make sure that the kids have what they need, and that the schools are informed, and they are getting the services that they need in order to be supported and successful emotionally, mentally, but also basic needs met. And so, it just seems like that's what everyone should do and would do in this scenario. I don't feel like it makes us special. I feel like it makes us an organization that loves the people that work with us.
And Alexis, as this situation with Mish isn't going away, but you guys do have another playoff match coming up this Saturday, as you won round 1. Now you're on to the semifinals. You've got a Saturday match against Greenville. how's the team just feeling mentally as they got that first one under their belt, moving on to round 2 here?
I haven't seen many of them since Sunday because they rested yesterday, so they'll be back to trade today, and I'll hopefully get to see some of them this morning when they come in and just kind of see how everybody's doing. We're hopefully going to do some fun things maybe in the locker room to keep spirits up. I mean, they're very focused. They want to do this for him and for themselves. They've all worked really, really hard this season. Everyone has worked hard this season. We've had our learning moments and we've had our ups and downs. And to be able to be here with our fan base in Omaha on Saturday is exciting and fun. And we just hope that the community will come out and support us and continue to support us Saturday afternoon. And, the Huskers don't have a game, so got to come out to Warner Park at 4 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah.
But we have some opportunities for nonprofits to come out, too. There's a new button on our webpage and on our social media that if you can't come to the game or if you buy your own ticket, you can buy a ticket on that link that will go into a kitty of tickets that we're going to be able to donate to nonprofits to get more people out here that haven't experienced soccer at Warner Park, Union Omaha. So, we're just hopeful that lots of people will be out here on Saturday. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Alexis, we appreciate it as always. Good luck this weekend, and hopefully we're talking again this time next week before a finals match.
I sure hope so.
Alexis, we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
That's Alexis Boulos, GM of Union Omaha.
It's a class act.
Well, the class organization, really, from the top to bottom.
He's a total class act.
Well, West Side kid.
yeah, of course.
Listen, I do it with Miller North guys, do it with West Side guys. It works.
Yeah, she's great.
Coming up next, we're going to talk to Ryan Burns. He covers Minnesota, a Gophers team that DB was a little worried about. All of a sudden, PJ Fleck might be able to coach again. We will talk to Ryan Burns from Gophers 24/7 coming up next. Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are joined now by Ryan Burns. He covers Minnesota Gophers football for 24/7 Sports. Ryan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are the vibes down there in Nebraska?
Probably not as good as they are up there.
Yeah, I got to get this out of the way since we've got jokes. Ryan, you've got a fellow colleague down here that would like to hear you openly express your thoughts on Mr. Ingram. I don't know if it has anything to do with his 46 PFF grade, but Schaefer thinks you'd have some thoughts.
Well, I think he's still riding high off of his Cleveland Guardians, watching my Minnesota Twins down the stretch absolutely fall apart. And you can tell, Mr. Schaefer, I'm well aware of the Vikings offensive line play, specifically his favorite player. I want you to ask him how much is he going to be putting that Ed Ingram jersey up for sale on eBay later today.
I mean, we're talking to him in about 15 minutes, so we definitely can do that. Ryan, before we dive too deep into Minnesota, I know you're a Heisman voter, and I always like to get guys' perspective on how they view the award, right? It seems like a lot of people are and I know you can't tell me how you're going to vote. That's fine. But a lot of people seem like they're down to Travis Hunter and Ashton Gianti from Boise State. Like when you've got two very different guys like that, a two-way player, super unique, obviously a skill set that we haven't seen in a few decades at best, and then you've got this just hyper-dominant guy kind of out in the middle of nowhere in this group of 5 school. Like, how do you weigh those two things as you're going through this?
That's a great question. It's one where, as we continue to go throughout the month of November and these teams really start to solidify themselves, and certainly it helps Genti's case that Boise State, as we sit here today, could potentially be playing in the college football playoff. But certainly I think he's the most gifted running back in college football. And regardless if he's at Boise State, Nebraska, Miami, wherever it may be, I think that should mean something in this day and age where I don't like that the Heisman has essentially just become a quarterback award. I remember back in the day voting for Aiden Hutchinson for the Heisman back when Michigan was really, really good. I just think you have to continue to weigh things regardless of position, and that's where Travis Hunter is such a unicorn. I mean, you still got other guys like Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, maybe even Curtis Rourke. I mean, if Indiana continues to play the way that they're doing it. But I mean, certainly Hunter and Genti, I'm well aware of. I mean, they're certainly really much in consideration, but you always just try and weigh everything as equally as you can. You know, if it ends up being a quarterback again, so be it. But with the way that those two are so unique in this season of college football, I think it's definitely worth monitoring.
Ryan, it's interesting because I do want to, early in the off season, I thought it was interesting and just getting a chance to know Minnesota staff so well from recruiting here, and I'm evaluating the turnover and the roster, and I'm looking at Coach Collins, and I'm like, man, DC, it's almost like you're about it, right? Like, what are we thinking here? And he's very optimistic. And I looked at my partner and I said, gosh, I'm kind of concerned about Minnesota this year. And I look up, and it's like, oh, death taxes and PJ Fleck. Right? Like, how, Ryan?
Well, a lot of it has to do with Danny Collins' safety group, which I would tell you, I came into the season saying they were the biggest question mark on the entire roster. Now they got a true freshman leading the Big Ten in interceptions in Coy Parrish. Alongside of him is a kid by the name of Kerry Brown, who's a freshman, who is number 2 in terms of PFF grades defensively. But I think it really revolves around Max Brosmer, their quarterback. If you look at this 4-game winning streak that they're on, Max Brosmer has been lights out in the fourth quarter, leading, I think, at least 3 different game-winning drives. And it starts against USC, where Minnesota's 2-3 going into that game. And they, Fleck has talked about all week how they kind of just drew a line in the sand and said, we're a better football team than we are, that our record says we are. And ultimately, at the end of the season, you are what your record says you were. And so if you want us to be remembered in a better light, we have to attack this thing against USC the next week. And that's where Brosmer, on this 4-game winning streak Minnesota's on, is completing 70% of his passes with 0 turnovers and 10 total touchdowns.
Yeah.
Minnesota hasn't turned the football over in over 14 quarters, while on the flip side, they have forced 9 turnovers. Not only are they winning the take-give each week, which is such a big part of football, obviously, they're annihilating other opponents. So if you can get an extra few possessions, which is how they end up beating Illinois, is they get a turnover on downs and a couple of fumbles, and they get points off turnovers, that's how you can find sustained success, which that's why Minnesota's on a 4-game winning streak.
Ryan, I'm always curious about PJ Fleck because he is a guy that, if you believe reports, was kind of angling for maybe a way to get out of Minnesota, looking for other jobs in the offseason. He's obviously had a good amount of success at Minnesota, but if you look back for the past 25 years, honestly, he's not really an outlier compared to what like a Glenn Mason or a Jerry Kill has done. I guess, what's the feeling around PJ Fleck, who has won pretty consistently, but doesn't totally necessarily seem like he wants to be there long term?
Yeah, it was an interesting offseason because, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you that UCLA steam was real. Obviously it didn't end up happening. They went with Deshaun Foster. And I think a lot of that potentially has to do with UCLA running a deficit for 4 straight years, their athletic director on thin ice, their chancellor on thin ice. But I would also say in that same breath, I can tell you that the Flecks are finishing up building a new house. And it is a little bit of an interesting spot for him. Now, I would say that he is the 3rd longest tenured head coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Which, think about that statement, behind Kirk Ferentz and James Franklin. There's been a lot of turnover. And I think, especially in this day and age of, everybody wants to pull the plug so quick on somebody, Fleck has been very consistent. And I think he's been probably a tier above what Glenn Mason did for so many years. And obviously there's a lot of Gopher fans that remember how that ended with a spectacular bowl loss and then his firing. But I just think if you can be consistent at a place like Minnesota, which PJ Fleck certainly has been, I think he's got about a 60% win percentage. This is a very difficult job. You don't have all the NIL. I would argue you have one of the worst 300-mile recruiting bases in the Big Ten. And now you look up here with a couple of games left in November, and you're 6-3 yet again. So I think the job he's done here is pretty dang good.
So how much credit, clearly maybe all of it, should we give to, even though assistants have come and gone, the way Minnesota looks is very similar. You could tell he's very particular about style and continuity, or because it can't be by happenstance?
No, and that's where you've got a first-year defensive coordinator in Corey Heatherman. You have a second-year offensive coordinator in Greg Harbaugh, and yet the identity of the team continues to be they're going to play incredibly hard for 60 minutes, regardless of who's coaching them. And that's where I've heard Fleck refer to it before, that while the assistant coaches may be the uncles, he's the dad. Maybe the uncles that come and go a little bit more, but they're going to come back to what the heartbeat of this team is, and that's going to be PJ and his row the boat. And I understand that, again, that's not for everybody. I understand that PJ Fleck's not for everybody, because the number one question I always get is PJ Fleck always like this? And my answer always is, my 8th year covering him, whether it's in the season, in the off season, whether he's on the recruiting trail, whatever it may be, every single interaction is the same. Yes, he's 5 Red Bulls all the time, and I get that it's off-putting, but I mean, these kids would run through a wall for that guy, and that's where fit is something that PJ Fleck, it's the number one thing he talks about in recruiting. I mean, everybody wants to have the most athletic guys, the guys that look like they're going to play on Sundays, but if he doesn't think they fit, it's going to be tough for them to succeed in Minneapolis, and I think he's done a good job of figuring out who fits with his style and how to get them to play as well as they have been.
Ryan, is that what you think this has actually worked? Because you're right, the whole PJ Fleck thing can kind of come off a certain way, but is it because it's authentic? Is that why it works? Because it's not an act, like that's just who he is, so people can buy it?
I remember Tim Brewster, and I remember watching that, and I thought that was an act, and I think ultimately it was, which is why he never got another shot. I think he's a great recruiter, but I think that it wasn't as authentic as it is here. And again, I understand that people, some people don't think it's authentic, but you can't fake your way into this amount of consistent success for Minnesota. Now, success is always a relative term. Would Georgia think what Minnesota's done here in the last handful of seasons is successful? Probably not. But for a Gopher fan base that, look, I'm 32 years old. I have seen a lot of Minnesota mediocre football in my life. Trust me. I mean, a lot of it is just, are they even going to get to a bowl game?
Yeah.
And now we've seen them win 8-9 games here pretty consistently throughout the last, I think this will, if they're able to take care of business down the stretch here, they could win 8 games for, their 4th time here, I think, in the last 6 years, which that doesn't happen very consistently at Minnesota. But I would say I don't think it happens unless it's authentic. You can't fake your way to success, especially in this day and age of college football.
This is going to sound weird in the last 30 seconds, but in some weird, warped way, I look at this one against Rutgers as kind of like a litmus test, right? Because this is a game you're favored, you should win, and if you're the team that you think you are, you come out of Piscataway with a win, right?
Well, it's an odd game because there's so many connections between Minnesota and Rutgers. I mean, we're talking about both of their coordinators have been on staff at Minnesota. Minnesota's coordinators know them very well. Ethan Kaliakmanis is their starting quarterback. I mean, Rutgers also got a bye week to prepare. In theory, on paper, I agree with you. This is a game that Minnesota should win. But I also think we're all human beings, and there's going to be a little bit more emotion for a random 11 a.m. game in Piscataway, and we'll see if Minnesota is able to overcome that.
Ryan, we appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
We'll be back. We'll be back to more Hurrdat Sports Radio and a little breaking news regarding Nebraska's coaching staff. Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. Do we have Schaefer, Shane?
Not yet.
Okay, as we wait for Schaefer to log in, I mentioned some breaking news regarding Nebraska's coaching staff. That is Pete Thamel reporting that Dana Holgorsen is joining Nebraska's staff as an offensive consultant. So that is something that was rumored over the offseason with Dana Holgorsen. Looks like it is finally coming to fruition here in the bye week.
Yeah, it was, and you've got a little bit of time. We'll see what happens with the consistency and continuity in the run game to see what happens, and then how quickly we can get it mastered for USC.
Yeah.
USC is going to change a little bit in terms of their bye week, starting a new quarterback with Maivia.
It was a very different skill set
than
Miller Moss. Yeah.
So for Nebraska and Holgorsen, I mean, your coach basically, he told you, right? Like, I'll make no mistake, I'll do what I need to do
to get this thing done. Yeah.
So consider the first chess piece move.
Wasted no time.
Yeah.
There are also, these are rumors, not reports. There's also rumors that Phil Snow, former DC for Coach Rhule at Baylor, is also in town.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that might be one of the outside guys that's looking just to
give it some eyes.
Yes, not necessarily saying he's being brought in as well.
Yeah, because Snow was the guy that people thought Coach Rhule was going to be on the staff, and I talked to Coach Rhule about that for a long time.
Yeah.
And Snow just was a guy that wasn't interested in coaching again, right? So
actually in the 60s, I think.
Yeah, kind of been there, done that. So I think.
And we know what Coach Rhule requires of his coaches. Like, that's not.
Yeah. And I think he knows. I mean,
he worked for him. Yeah. Obviously.
So it's like, and it doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be a defense to defense thing. Sometimes it's a guy knows me.
Yeah.
He knows how I like to operate. Take a look at how I'm operating.
Also, again,
a fresh set of eyes too.
Yeah, not just a fresh set of eyes, but a fresh set of eyes that's probably not afraid to speak some hard truths to Coach Rhule.
Right.
Yeah. This dude's, I think he's 68 years old, is not looking for a job, right? Like, doesn't care, like, isn't worried about you firing him or hiring him or anything like that.
Yep.
And probably has a relationship in a place where he's like, hey, I can say whatever to Coach Rhule and we're going to be good.
Yep.
Let's bring in now our friend Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just the usual 8:50 a.m. news dump resulting in a former head coach that was previously on campus earlier in the year joining the staff as an offensive analyst in November. Just the usual bye-week stuff that you get.
Yeah, just super normal stuff. I mean,
I almost feel like I shouldn't be talking about Ed Ingram and when you're putting his jersey up for sale later today, like Ryan talked.
We should never be talking about Ed Ingram unless it's the Minnesota Vikings waive Ed Ingram, and then I'm okay with it. But you know what? That's one of Kwesi's last picks in the 2022 draft that was a total and utter disaster for him. So he's got to hold on forever and milk every ounce of value out of that.
Yeah. How about the 8:50 news dump? Coach Rhule talked about a couple guys coming in that he trusts to kind of analyze what he's doing and to give him a set of eyes. And I think that's obviously a place where, like a guy where Snow comes in, if nothing else, that he could tell Coach Rhule some hard truths about whatever it is that he sees. And I think Coach Rhule understands the place that it's coming from. I took a different stance on Coach Rhule's press conference yesterday, Schaefer, because I felt like if I feel like Coach Rhule, 85-90% of what he's doing, I think is very portable to success, and you want to be self-aware enough to clean up the 10%, that's kind of what I heard. Like, I think he himself has to go through this chafing process just so we're sure that absolute power doesn't corrupt absolutely, right? I mean, he's self-aware enough to say, hey, listen, maybe I need to evaluate what I'm doing. And I actually like that.
Well, I mean, I give him credit for saying it out loud, but I mean, yeah, you got to evaluate what you're doing too. Your team's 5-4. You just lost at home in a game against a UCLA team that was more physical, was more prepared, outplayed you, showed up on time when the game started, didn't need an entire quarter and a half to get into the game flow of it. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some kind of self-reflection. It sounds surprising to us because the previous coach spent 5 years just blaming everything else and never once looking inward like, hey, am I doing something wrong? Or ever vocalizing it, I suppose. So it comes off a little bit different, but I would be a little concerned if Matt Rhule wasn't reflective at this point in time when you're 5-4 and the season feels like it's getting away from you a little bit. And you've now lost 5 games in the month of November. You've now lost 7 games when you've had an opportunity to get to bowl eligibility between the last 2 years. I think it's time for a little self-reflection. And then it's also probably time to see where that self-reflection leads. And so I think this is all a natural progression of how things have played out. But it also leads to the question of why did it take getting to this point for changes to be made, or what differences are we going to see coming out of it? I guess I don't know. There's a part of me, I'm all over the place, so just jump in whenever you need to cut me off here. But there's a part of me that basically Oh, go ahead.
I'll jump in here. So I guess you mentioned, it should have taken place a little bit earlier, the self-reflection. But I look at, okay, I don't know when. So I guess my question is when, right? Because okay, you're 5-1, things are going the way you want them to. You get your head beat in by Indiana, so you self-reflect seemingly and have a chance to beat a playoff team, one of the best teams in the country. And you kind of go like, hey, this is who we can be. We responded to this bad game. And then the UCLA thing happened. Yeah. You're like, oh, that obviously isn't what happened. So I guess I'm just not sure where they would have felt the need to self-reflect before that.
That's kind of where
to this degree.
That's kind of where I look at it.
Sure, that's fair. I mean, I guess the idea to me is that self-reflection could have happened at any point in October, and maybe it did, and he's just now publicly saying it. I don't know that you're necessarily going to get changes that publicly are visible, and maybe they've been doing things a lot different behind the scenes, but where your offense is today and what you saw across the last, that's what happened in the UCLA game from the defensive side is a little bit of a surprise. What happened on offense is not a surprise to anyone that has watched the team over the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is sort of who they've been. And so I guess maybe it needed the fourth data point to kind of get there, that you needed help offensively. I would think that the Ohio State, Indiana, Rutgers, and even a little bit before it, Purdue wasn't near as bad, but it had been trending in this direction for at least a little while. And again, I'm not talking about making a wholesale change at offensive coordinator, but I would hope that there was some real self-reflection of what was happening on offense well before this week. And I assume there has been, but this is a talking point that we have coming out of.
Schaefer, yeah, so I think I agree with you on the self-reflection on the offensive standpoint. I think what he was getting at more was sort of a more holistic self-reflection on, and I think we got this to a certain degree with, him saying, hey, I'll do whatever's necessary to get us over the top, and talking about hey, I'll talk to players' parents if I have to, and seemingly giving some indication of maybe some more wholesale, I don't know if changes, but certainly wholesale reflection, as opposed to, hey, let's try and shore up this offense. Because I don't know, I look at the offense on Saturday especially, and I agree, there's been issues for about a month, significant issues for about a month. But I also look at, and you're up in the press box too, and you can see there's guys open that Dylan Raiola is just not throwing the ball to.
Yeah, no, it's not. I want to be as clear as possible. It's never just the play caller.
Sure.
It's never just. It's all of it. Everything in that offense isn't working. Your offensive line doesn't create enough for your running backs to be able to flourish. Your running backs don't find holes when they're available. Your receivers don't win one-on-ones. Your quarterback isn't picking up when guys are wide open, as in the first play of the second half. Now, we don't know what exactly he's being told, hey, what his first read is, but if the coverage that you get shows that, Thomas Fidone, I'm assuming they got the look they wanted for Thomas Fidone. I don't understand why the ball
it's a cover 2 beater, right? We saw Dallas Clark make a living.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And
so
go ahead.
I'm just saying, it's not like they don't have the study guide for what they need to do. Players aren't making plays, and then it comes down to, are they getting the coaching that they need to make that plays? Is Marcus Satterfield doing enough to provide for them to be able to make the play? So it's all of it. It's not just Satterfield. It's not just Raiola. It's the collective offense has been a real issue for a month. And I think that, how they choose to pursue attacking this will tell us what happens over the final 3 games.
Schaefer, are you when you're watching this and you watch the run game, and everybody has their opinions, the running backs versus the O-line or whatever. From your vantage point, do you feel like things are blocked well enough to yield better results than we got? Or maybe a different way I should ask it is, of the 4 offensive positions, where is your level of concern if you ranked them?
Well, it's not quarterback, even though the play hasn't been well. But the concern, I think there's a lot happening there, but I don't have long-term concern with the quarterback position. I think it's still running back for me. I really do.
And then who?
And then the offensive line. I like the pieces they have
ahead of wide receiver.
Yeah, I still like some of the pieces they have at wide receiver. I wonder why an offensive line that has veterans for like Bryce Benhart and Ben Scott has regressed sort of to where they were the year before. And then here's what's concerning to me with the running game. When it's blocked well, I feel like Dante Dowdell misses the hole, or Emmett Johnson chooses not to run to the hole. And then when it's not blocked well, you never see those guys get to the second level. So then you see like 7 defenders just swarming the running back at a 2-yard level. So it feels like when they have it set up, the running back doesn't hit the spot. When it's not set up, the running back is just getting swallowed whole. I would love to see more Ramir Johnson than we get. I don't know if he got hurt. He had a couple nice runs in the second half, and then he was just kind of put on the shelf for the rest of the game. So I don't know what happened there. I don't like the running situation at all. I don't like how it gets blocked, and I certainly don't think they have good enough running backs for what they want to do at times, but then they also don't commit. They're going to get in, they don't commit to running the ball. The times they commit to running the ball, they're inside the 10-yard line trying to score, and you haven't done that all game, and you don't block like that all game. So why are you just going to move people at that point in time when they know what you're trying to do because you get really conservative? It just, we could spend your entire show going through all the different issues in the running game because it's not so simplistic as how I make it sound. But there doesn't feel like there's a commitment to it. It doesn't feel like it's getting blocked effectively. It doesn't feel like your best offensive linemen have played particularly well at all this season. It feels like you're asking a lot of a guy like Gunnar Katula to not only be good in pass protection and a tough spot at left tackle, but he's also got to be able to physically manhandle people because he's not going to get any extra help because everyone needs extra help. They all need extra help, and it's not working for them for whatever reason.
It's just hard for me to. I guess I'm just looking for help, right? We're like tag team partners. I don't think you can get credit for development of young guys like Gatula, but then get kind of the vitriol and snapback from guys like Ben Scott and Benhart for regressing, right? It's.
So that was what my next question was, right? Because Schaefer, we've talked a lot about DB and I have talked a lot about kind of the weight of expectations on some of these older guys that haven't had that before and performing under expectations versus performing when nothing's expected of you. Like, could you see that as a plausible explanation for regression from guys? Like, nobody expected anything out of Brice Benhart last year. The fact that he wasn't an abomination was a huge win. And this year we're looking at Brice Benhart as like, that's a guy that we can count on. Like, that's a very different experience for Brice Benhart.
I guess the counter to that would be if Brice Benhart doesn't have those expectations for himself, why did he come back? What was the point of playing another year? If his expectations are to get to the NFL, is to be an NFL player, you've got to be able to handle everything that comes with that. And same with Ben Scott. I mean, that's part of another frustration that I have just watching this program right now. Is that you have all of these guys that chose to come back for another reason. And, I would think that there's a level of pride and self-motivation of how you wanted this to finish out. And I think for a lot of them, it's been really unsteady. I mean, for every John Bullock, there's guys, I don't have to say names, but there's guys that have gone the other way with their sort of senior season. And it's, maybe they're not able to meet the expectation, or maybe they just had a really good year the year before and teams are playing them differently. Whatever it is, there are guys that came back that you expected to be a plus, and they've either been neutral or a negative. And that's difficult when you have veterans that aren't performing up to the level that you want, let alone asking young guys to have to step in or play at a level maybe that exceeds their capabilities at this point.
Yeah, that is so interesting because, guys that came back is one thing, and we're talking about inconsistencies and I got a really good message from a buddy that talked about some of the inconsistencies in players or guys that were single digits. And so then I got into that. And Schaefer, let me just ask you something. I bring up Disneyland quite a bit and it being pretty good at Nebraska. At what point do you think, or should you, or would you just say, hey, you know what? Like, life's been pretty good for you guys. Some guys aren't delivering the way that we wanted to, and there is this regression. And I know it's pretty good here being in Lincoln. You don't redistribute, but do you just eat your losses per se? Because this is they are getting paid some. Do you just eat your losses and move on?
I think that's a real conversation that has to happen during this bye week in the lead up to USC. I mean, again, we can get into names if you want, but there are guys that have had steady roles for the last 2 seasons, and you watch them fail over and over on Saturday. And there's a part of me that's like, is it the worst thing if you're putting in someone young who doesn't necessarily know what if player X knows what he's doing, but he's slow to get to the spot, or he doesn't wrap up the tackle, or he's missing his run fit, or the bust, and whenever the bust happened, you continually come back to the same player. And I'm talking about defense here, but it works on offense too. You're not
certainly works
everywhere. So yeah, there's a part of me that wonders, if Nebraska wouldn't be better served playing some of the younger guys that are going to be here for a while, and thank the people who helped get you to this spot, but maybe aren't playing at a level that guarantees their playing time. I mean, I don't know that anyone over there for a 5-4 operation where you can't even tell who the best player is right now should feel safe about playing time. And I mean that about everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you're John Bullocks. I don't think he should lose playing time because he's been great all year. But very few guys can look in the mirror and say, I played at the high level all 9 games. I am deserving of having my name written in ink on that starting lineup. There's very few guys over there. I mean, you haven't gotten those performances. That's part of why it feels as uneven as it does. Every week, you're waiting for people to show up and make a play, and plays aren't necessarily getting made.
Schaefer, that's a pretty good point. Like, I would have a hard time coming up with a list of guys who I thought their playing time was unimpeachable in terms of
there's nobody over there that's unassailable from criticism. There's no question about that.
Just like, hey, this guy, there's no question about it. This guy you make a good point with Bullock. Bullock might be as close as we've got to a guy that's consistently performed.
And the reason, and not that everybody else does, I'm not even going to couch it. I'm just going to say it. People do with it what they will. And one of the reasons that I believe in Bullock is because the results matter to him, and they matter quite a bit. So I'm okay with the results. What you have to process through when you're spending money and guys are, or on this NIL thing is you have to be very diligent to make sure the results still matter. Mm-hmm. And there has to be some consequences when they don't. And the easy answer is to point to defensive backs, but it's not just defensive backs.
It's all over.
It's all over. It's
defensive backs.
There's nobody there's nobody that hasn't taken a ride on the blame or hasn't struggled for that team. I mean,
I think the Disneyland thing isn't just for the coaches. It's for players too. There's no question. I mean, I've said that, Schaefer, you've been talking to me for 11 years now. This if you're not built a certain way or have enough speed bumps, it can ruin you in a hurry if you're not built to be grimy. Like you just have to be able to deal with suffering a little bit to keep you sharp. There's no other way to say it except you can handle the riches that come with lack of success.
Is it too simplistic to say that the 2024 Nebraska team is largely a front-running football team? When things are good, they're really good.
And
when things get rocky, they can't really
I
overcome
hate front runners, right? That's why I picked the name. Like it's, and I think that leads to a level of inconsistency too. And that's part of this whole re-examining thing. Like, I love the fact that Coach Rhule said, I need to take a look at, because you want to treat, there is this autonomy, and you do want to treat people like adults, and you do want the best for them.
But when they're not doing their job.
And he is a protector by nature.
But
and he doesn't like transactional things. So it sharpens him, too, because his core is cut out for this. He's never satisfied. He's competitive. Like, his core.
But how does he get that instilled into his team? Where does that toughness come from? Why is Bud Crawford up there standing in front of your team for the Colorado game preaching about when you step into the ring, you know you're going to win? And yet this version of the team that goes out against UCLA, that wasn't Bud Crawford. That was Glassjaw Joe. I mean, they just did not have it. They didn't have it. They didn't come in thinking they were going to win, and they got hit in the face, and 8 minutes later, they got off the field on a field goal, and we're all typing on our devices, well, that's a win for Nebraska. They gave up 8 minutes of a drive, didn't get off the field on 4 different times on third downs, couldn't make a play. Nobody got a hand on a football from the defensive backfield. Nobody got a hand on a football from the defensive line. Yeah, I mean, they aren't the same team week in and week out. I think we know that they're front runners. I mean, I said that as if I was posting it as a theory. I think it's pretty obvious.
Schaefer, as you there's a lot in there, Schaefer. As you kind of think about, and we've only got about a minute left with you, as you kind of think about how he goes from getting that core of what's in him and that competitiveness out to his players, how much do you think he has to work against sort of some of the things that he felt bit him in Carolina?
Without knowing exactly what those things are, I mean, I think they try to surround themselves with guys who want to play football, with guys who care about football.
So that's
the point. You have to weed out the guys who are there to get the NIL checks. You got to find the guys that are there because they want to win, and it burns their ass every day that they lose until they get to play the next game. That's how they're going to be successful again.
100%.
And until that happens, we're just going to be sitting here wondering, why this, why that. It comes down to finding that mentality and bottling it up and putting it out there for 60 minutes every Saturday you get the opportunity to.
Schaefer, great stuff as always. We appreciate your time, and we will talk to you again soon.
That felt fast, guys. All right, we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Mike J.
Enjoy your bye. We'll be back with more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. It is time for Bet On It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Warhorse, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. Make sure you get to the casinos in Lincoln or Omaha. You can place parlays, straight bets, props, whatever you can think. In-game, props. Me. I love some props. I love some in-game. That's how I like to roll. You can place bets on nearly every major sporting event.
You treat me like a prop. That's why it's the props you like.
Go to warhorsecasino.com for more info. Before we get into Bet On It, though, let's get to TK here. He wants to talk about the O-line. I'm shocked. Wants to talk about the O-line and what Schaefer said about it. What's going on, TK?
Good morning, fellas. Schaefer was talking about the O-line, and so I felt like I was summoned.
Your ears start burning a little bit?
Just a little bit.
What's up, buddy?
At first I thought I was going to disagree with him, but I unfortunately agree with Schaefer a little bit.
What do you got? Talk to me.
Well, I think we need to see some Sammy Sledge and some Brock Knutson in replacement for ye old Brice Benhart and Ben Scott.
Yeah, you were texting me during the game that you were a little taken aback by some of the play, no? But I will say, was that you that somebody asked me, or was 93 that good? I said 93 was a problem all week.
Yeah, 93 is
I said that low key, that was the key matchup. He's a problem.
Yeah, I talked about that. That guy's a monster. Ben Scott also played horrifically, and the one thing I will push back on about Schaefer is that he said that none of these guys are playing good. Justin Evans had his best game. There were times that Justin Evans made 93 look like he wasn't even going to play. He wasn't going to play college.
Yeah, when he got a chance to come down, like that game was all about angles. right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, when he got a chance to block back, and I mean, you weren't gonna reach him, but like that game was all about power at the point of attack. TK, at what point did you think UCLA had a clear advantage of knowing what Nebraska was doing? Because for me, it happened about 3 minutes into the second quarter.
Yeah, I'd say middle of the first half. I think they really caught on. Unfortunately, I think
had you ever seen a team move?
Just make it too obvious.
Had you ever seen a team move that late? Like sometimes the ball was being snapped, and you only do that unless you know where the ball is going.
Yeah, the only teams that do that is if that's their scheme. That's not UCLA's scheme. They had a real good idea of what Nebraska wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. All right, TK.
Appreciate the call. It's good to see you this weekend.
We'll see you.
Thanks, buddy.
There was. I thought Justin Evans played well on Saturday. I think Schaef's point was like season long. Like I think he was talking about over the course of the whole season.
Yeah, he was. I think he was.
And there's been points where Justin Evans hasn't played great this year, and that people have wanted more out of him.
True.
So yeah, I mean, you could look at you look at Ohio State and you'd be like, yeah, Jamari Butler's, best player on the team maybe, but he hasn't played like that all year.
Can I ask you something?
What's up?
I think I'm betting on the fact that coaches have similarly felt the pressure when they come here. And I guarantee I know what fans will say. Oh no, man, you got a long runway and nobody had it as good as this guy or this, that. I've heard this a long time.
You really don't have that long of a runway.
I've heard it a long time. Okay. And whether it's actually a fireable offense versus us we complain, like maybe that's two different things. But I've heard this is the third coach now. And I would say to some degree the fourth, where I felt like people what's the $64,000 question people always ask here about young players? Well, they play young players other places. They play young players other places. How long have we heard that?
At least back to Bo.
So I have a theory.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes coaches feel the pressure or are afraid to make mistakes with young guys because of this undertone of turning it around. We hear a lot of, hey, we got to tear this thing in from the ground up.
Nobody actually tries to do it.
Nobody, this is kind of the first time, but you got teased with fool's gold because defensively you were good enough to not want to waste the rebuild.
Yeah. I mean, even to a certain
extent.
Does that
make sense? Like
100%. No, 100%. Because
nobody's really that's really the thing.
And it's the thing that Frost told you out loud that he goes, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would have I'd have tore it to the ground and not tried to win right away.
I would have not rolled the dice. He'd have just went young.
Yeah, which is, I even think to a certain extent, Rhule, with the convictions that we love about him, I even think he's compromised those a little bit with that. Like, because you're right. He got fool's gold with the defense last year.
I told you, it's a fine line. I said this after and before Indiana. The tricky part for this staff is to figure out what goals are still ascertainable, attainable. They had to ascertain what was still attainable. Let's just say that. Versus, you know what? I know we have some guys with some limitations. We need to look at some things.
Yeah.
It was a very, very, very fine line. And now, we'll see what can happen over the bye week. But now, we'll see what happens with having options. Because as a coach, you always want options, whether it's your staff or your players. It's not just the players, right? You can't be in a 2-by to the field and not use inside leverage, right? Like, Gilmore is running a corner route. You just saw Charles get beat on it in the first half. Same concept. So, are you really watching what's going? Like, how much attention are we paying to?
Like what's happening in front of us?
Like what's actually happening?
Yeah. So here's my.
You know what I mean? Like, because. That's what, and I seldom get into the nitty gritty of it, but that shouldn't happen to you multiple times the way that
it did.
Well, I wouldn't say much except people do it to Nebraska all the time.
Yeah. You don't learn from the thing that just happened.
Yeah. People do it to Nebraska all the time.
Yeah.
Well, got a tendency. We're going to do this. What do you think's happening when they're on the hard hash? They have the field, a 2-by, and the guy tightens his split down along the hash. He's closer because he wants to move out.
Yeah. He's giving himself space. He's giving the quarterback
space. So why, if I stack you inside, do you want to?
You want to shift out to take away?
You don't have any help there.
That option.
And you just got mad at Charles for doing the same thing. Like, so it's things like that where I'm like, man, I don't know. There's no way that's being coached. But do you feel like you have options? If you're upset, how long are you going to talk about perimeter blocking?
Yeah. Before you just put people out there that are going to do it.
And say, hey, because
is there nobody out there on the team that can do it? Is that the answer? Is there nobody in that room that can do it?
You know when you'd probably do it?
When?
If you didn't think your quarterback was very good or your defense was very good.
You know why you could do it last year?
Because that's what people want.
Yeah.
But you can't sacrifice. You can. You have to figure out what you're going to sacrifice.
What you're willing to sacrifice.
What you're willing to sacrifice.
It's the same thing we talk about when you're talking about scheming up the defense.
Am I going to waste this year with my quarterback's development? And maybe you're not wasting it, but that's what they have to think about.
That's what it feels like to the fans, at least.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what you have to think about.
Oh, how come Dylan Ryle is only throwing it 18 times a game? How come we're not why aren't our best receivers? Why aren't the guys that we paid in the offseason to come here out making game-breaking plays? We saw Isaiah Nayor. Why isn't he out there making plays, right?
Yeah, people thought I was crazy. I'm jobless and I'm struggling, and I'm like, you guys called me, and I'm like, ideally, build the pieces up around Dylan so he doesn't have to be that good.
Yeah.
Right?
So he can just be –
because if you looked at the roster, it was either going to be new guys or young guys. We didn't get that. So what was my number one concern? I hope the mentality of guys that aren't used to being counted on, that's one of the things I got to watch.
Yeah.
If I want to know the direction of this season. I'm not down on old guys, and I'm not saying you've lost too much, but what I'm saying is because everybody can have a philosophical or a mind shift. You can grow. There's this thing called the growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right. So you can do that. But were they going to get off or have enough success or enough cushion? You just don't know about people's psyches.
Yeah.
But one of the guys that I was willing to roll the dice on, not to single him out just because I think he's playing pretty okay, but I knew Bullock's temperament.
Yeah.
And you
weren't worried about him.
And he's athletic, because some people want it. It's like the girl. It's like the dating the pretty girl thing.
Sometimes you want to go out with the
she's just not going to say. See, Bullock has all the tools.
Yeah, he's got the physical capabilities for his want to matter.
Yep.
Right.
So that's why I ride with him.
And that's
because I'll take his mind.
That's the rub, right? Is do your physical abilities, are they good enough to make the want to matter? And if you've got the physical abilities, do you have the want to?
Yeah. I tell Boulos, I'm like, hey man, you're gifted physically. Just go get it.
Yeah.
At some point, enough's enough, right?
Which, if Coach Rhule didn't think these guys could play, he wouldn't say, hey, we just got to go make plays.
I know.
He would.
He told you.
He told you that they're good enough to make the plays, that physically they're able. This is a mental thing.
And he said, I'm over it.
That's Bet on It, brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi, Lulla. We're brought to you by our friends at Game Day Men's Health, where they understand every man is different, and they know better than anyone, and they can get you personalized care plans. That's the key. You've got your testosterone replacement therapy. They've also got peptides. They've got medical weight loss. They've got sports performance. They've got mental health benefits. They will personalize your plan specifically for you. So it's not just some weird, messaging somebody on a website and they don't actually know what's going on. You're talking to a real person that can help you feel better and reach your goals. Make sure you get over it to GameDayMen'sHealth.com to set up a consultation so you can check out what they've got going on, what me and DB have been checking out, what they've got going on. GameDayMen'sHealth.com is the place to go.
I just was there yesterday.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you see our friend Sky?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I passed the check.
It's a good crew over there. It's a good crew.
It's a great crew.
Yeah.
That's not even really historically my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Just
just interacting with randoms.
Yeah. But it's awesome.
And they'll even, if you don't have time to go over, I got mine shipped to me, so I'm doing it myself.
Apparently
now.
that's a thing I didn't know.
Yeah. You gotta be okay with needles, which I don't mind. I'm a diabetic, so I'm used to it.
I couldn't care less.
Otherwise, Sky will just take care of it. Just give you the quick 1-2.
She is hilarious.
Good to go. Did you get your B12 this time?
I got it last time.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
I take B12 too, so I wonder. You always got to worry about absorption, though. That's why I like when it goes into your bloodstream.
Yeah, instead of just taking the supplements.
Yeah, because a lot of times you get about, 28 to 33% of the absorption.
It's not that much.
It's not.
You got to get that. You got to jack those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah, T-Mac says something interesting.
What T-Mac say?
Because I want to go back to this rebuild versus fool's gold versus, oh, shoot, we may be better than we think. We better ride this out, or we got a good court.
Versus the pressure out of Nebraska to be like, hey, don't go and give me a 2-win season.
Yeah. Now, he said, in my circle, folks were good with the rebuild. Then the preseason, it started to sound like they think they could have a pretty good squad, and they're going to be competitive. So the expectation levels changed. I could 100% vibe. I could 100% vibe with that.
Here's the X factor with that, though.
Because I'll tell you where. Oh, go ahead.
Here's where I think the X factor is with that, though, and it's the thing that you're talking about, the playing with expectations. Because I think Coach Rhule can look at this squad and say, hey, this looks a lot like a 10-win team I've had at Baylor.
That's what I was going to say.
Or a 10-win team I had at Temple. This looks like a lot of dudes, because I know what dudes look like. I've been at Temple, I've been at Baylor, I've been in the NFL. I may not have been very good in the NFL, but I know what the dudes that play there and belong there look like at the very least.
Yeah,
right?
I think he thought like fit on the hoof.
Yes,
good football team.
I think physically,
but
what
you can't measure
is how they perform under expectations.
It's the only thing I wanted to know all year,
and that's the only
pretty consistent.
Arguably, yes, 100%. That you've been talking about that since the spring, and arguably that's the only thing that's ended up mattering.
So what?
Because you still can't tell me that anybody that they've played so far is more talented than Nebraska, except Ohio State.
When you landed the plane yesterday after the presser, didn't you feel like he felt like he didn't really say put up or shut up, but kind of?
I mean, in nicer words, that's exactly what he said.
And I felt like he's talking to everyone.
Coaches and players.
To everyone.
100%.
Which is why he's allowing himself to be checked.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be dismissive of that.
Do you think it's an accident that the offensive consultant that he brought in is a former head coach?
No. And you think that the defensive consultant that's really just a consultant that he brought in
is the guy that doesn't need anything from him?
He doesn't need.
Because that matters.
That is so key.
That matters so much.
Like Snow could say, listen, I wasn't looking for a job when I got this one.
I was looking for a job when you got this one.
You know what I mean? So, but you have to have somebody that can come in and tell the tale.
You need somebody. I tell this to people all the time, right? You need someone. This is why I tell people to go to therapy, honestly, because you need someone in your life, whether it's a friend who has the stones to do it, which frankly a lot of them don't, it's just the truth, or you pay somebody to do it. You need somebody who is willing to tell you things that are going to piss you off.
Yeah.
Right? And
let's just say that you need to hear, and sometimes it can upset you.
Yeah, sure. Yes. You need that isn't afraid of telling you something that could upset you, right? That is a key to growth, because a lot of times, and well-meaning people, right? People that love you, people that care about you, people that want the best for you, care too much to risk the relationship to tell you something you need to hear.
Oh, yeah.
And if you've got a Phil Snow in there who's like, I don't need this job, I didn't want this job, I'm retired, he'll tell you whatever you need to know because he knows you and he doesn't need anything from you, right? Dana Holgorsen, as far as I know, does not have any pre-existing connection to Coach Rhule except for the rumors this offseason, right? He doesn't have this long-standing, like he's not an Evan Cooper or a Marcus Satterfield.
I don't know what you're going to learn going to a hoop game with a guy or something like that.
Right, yeah. Like it's not something where, they've known each other for 20 years and been coaching together. This is a guy in Dana Holgorsen who also famously gives very few Fs. Right? Like this is not, if you had to pick a guy out of a hat that's like, hey, he's going to say stuff and is not really going to care about the consequences, Dana Holgorsen's pretty high on that list.
That's funny too, because Coach Rhule said last couple weeks ago, he'll take advice from anyone if you've earned it.
Yeah. Guess what? Offensively, Dana Holgorsen's earned it.
Yeah.
Let's get to Lance here on the Hurrdat Hotline. Lance, what's going on, buddy?
Yes. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How you doing?
good. Hey, one of the things that concerns me about the whole managing expectations is when you look back to Rhule when he got here, he talked about Nebraska being ahead of where he was at Baylor. And then again, after the season last year, they were ahead of where he thought they should be. And so I think you couple that with the really light front-loaded schedule, and it's a recipe for, hey, I think we're a pretty good team. And I think then, unfortunately, as a fan base, a lot of people will look at just the score and think, oh yeah, we're going to cruise to 7, 8, 9 wins. And then if you look beyond those numbers, they don't. So I really like Rhule, and I think he nailed it yesterday. But I think that's probably the hardest job at Nebraska, or one of them, is managing expectations of yourself and then being honest, right? Because I think we all think Rhule's pretty honest.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does so, it can kind of also backfire, right? Because then fans hear good team, ahead of schedule, and then when they don't see those things progress, it equals trouble.
Yeah, you always trust when you disseminate information that the people you're dealing with can handle it. At some point, you can't be responsible for that. Do you know? So
Absolutely.
that's part of the growth. Because I mean, you're dead. Like, yeah, you told no lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think at some point, you can't own how people take it. You just got to let it rip, because that's how people get compromised over time.
Mm.
You have to be built to listen, but not always have to respond.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, Lance?
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm with you on you asked me about MC, and I appreciate the call, Lance. Like, he's asking me about some guys that who are the receivers that we always hear about? Like, where are they? Like, why don't they play more?
The one I hear most is Malachi Coleman.
Okay.
Because we saw him play last year. He's young. He's talented.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the one I hear most.
So he asked me about him again, and I said, hey, I don't know. He said, well, physically, he's got to be capable of blocking on the perimeter. I was like, the thing with this program, and I don't know where MC is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
besides, we know that Rhule said
I don't even ask.
shirt.
Like, I don't.
That's all we know about it. Really.
I know absolutely nothing. Don't even see to engage, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I don't think what ails this football team is anything to do with physical. So if you're starting with but then he kind of pushed back a little bit. And he says, well, isn't blocking on the nah.
You know what Kenny Bell said? It's all about 1-2.
No, I know.
100% about
he's
1-2.
a real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But who's got one of the most famous wide receiver hits in program history?
So what I'm saying with that is it's almost just what Lance was talking about. He went with Rhule. You can listen, but not have to respond to it, because you can know what's going on out there, and you don't have to fall victim to it. Like, you just have to kind of stay the course, and that goes for. I mean, Coach McGuire's got to hold his guys accountable. I don't care who they are.
And I don't care what they're being paid.
And if Coach McGuire can't hold his guys accountable, then Coach McGuire shouldn't be here.
Yeah, either Satterfield or Thomas has to hold him accountable. Right? That's how the line goes.
You want to go through
head coaches coach coordinators coach position coaches coach players.
Yeah.
So if one of your position coaches isn't getting it done, then that falls on a coordinator. If your coordinators aren't getting it done with your position coaches, then it falls on Coach Rhule. I think we are at the point where it is falling on Coach Rhule.
Yeah, one guy's is making some moves.
Yeah.
And still trying to give his team the chance to win.
100%. That's the difference.
I told you it's hard.
Yeah.
Because you have some goals.
You do have some, and they're right in front of you.
Said it after Indiana.
You need one more win.
Yeah.
But really, that's the only goal, right?
It was hard.
I said it yesterday.
The only goal for Nebraska is
to get to a bowl game.
One more game.
Yeah.
That's it, is to win one more game. So can you do that with saying, hey, we're going to play the young guys? Can you do that with saying, hey, I appreciate you old guys? And that's where I said this yesterday, and we both kind of said it, is, maybe Coach Rhule does need to be just a little bit more transactional.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the holdup is he doesn't want to put his older guys in a bad position. Because that's a tough spot. Yeah. You've been playing all year. You're 9 games into the season. You've got NFL hopes and aspirations. You get benched your last year in a program as it's nut cutting time. That's a tough spot to put a guy in. But what if that puts you in a better position to win? That's where the rub is if you're Coach Rhule.
Yeah.
we'll get into that. We'll get into more Dana Holgorsen stuff tomorrow as well. I've got some questions for DB about practically at this point in the season what Dana Holgorsen could be helpful with and those types of things. But we'll be back. It's been a good Tuesday. Make sure you get out and vote. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. It's Hurrdat Sports Radio.